Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17, and we will share the explanation of verses 96 to 100. Allah's treasures are infinite. There is a verse which points to this fact, and we will go over some salient points towards the end of this presentation. These are the references, and this is our contact in case anyone wishes to get in touch regarding this presentation or any of our previous presentation, or for that matter, any other matter concerning Tolu Islam. Recap of verses 88 to 95. The Quran is Wahi from Allah and is not the product of human intellect. Those who do not consider it to be a book of guidance for mankind should try to produce anything like the Quran. They will discover themselves that they simply cannot produce the permanent values, divine attributes, and principles revealed here, as these are complete and nothing is left out. If something is complete and founded on evidence-based facts, then nothing can be added to it. We have gone over some of these aspects in our previous presentations as well. And at the end of the day, each one of us has to convince himself or herself that Quran is a complete book and it is from Allah. Human intellect cannot produce anything like it. Why it is important? Because if we are studying the Quran and we want to draw the maximum benefit, then we have to come up with this conviction through our own choice and through our own study. So someone else cannot convince us about it. It is our own inner self which is looking for guidance should be able to make its own choice. The Quran is also presented in such a form which provides education and training for the human intellect if it is studied by cross-referencing its verses in order to understand their context within the framework of the system of Deen. In order to benefit from the Quran, it must be taken as one complete whole and not to pick and choose parts to support one's own biases. This is also an important aspect because if we take some parts of the Quran to suit our own desires, our own wishes, the way it is done in the domain of religion, then we can never ever be able to get that system of Deen which solves human problems. To have Iman in the Quran, there must not be any external or internal compulsion. For example, the desire for miracles, supernatural events, fear, physical persuasion, conformity, emotive reaction, etc. It should be through our own free volition or our own choice without any compulsion from anyone else. Of course, we can seek help from others in terms of understanding some parts of the Quran, but as far as acceptance of Iman is concerned, it has to be totally free by any individual so that they can make their own choices. Because that change in self does not take place if we accept it under some external persuasion or our own internal persuasion. All the messengers of Allah were all ordinary human beings, and if they could follow the revelation from Allah, so can we. And Quran has emphasized on this point all along that all human beings are equal and they are endowed with intellect and reasoning power. And if they use that, then they are able to follow the Quran. And that is why it gives the examples of different messengers who were all human beings, just like any one of us. An overview of today's presentation. What the messenger and his companions did as Jamaat under the guidance of Wahi, it is related back to Allah in the Quran. This provides continuous assurance to the Momineen that they have the protection of the laws of Allah. Both guidance and going astray is according to the law of Allah. If people do not accept the guidance of the Quran, then essentially they lose all the potential benefits associated with this guidance. This means that their self will not develop and they will remain in an undeveloped state, which will lead to absence of benefits of the life of the hereafter. And when Quran says about the life of the hereafter, it takes a look on our life as one continuous entity which goes beyond death. So over here we can say of the life of the future as well as of the hereafter. Not considering the possibility of another life beyond death means that man does not hold himself accountable. It also means that man lives his life without the choice of the hereafter, and as a result, such a self never acquires that attribute which is necessary for the next life. And this is a very important point on which we have gone over again and again, and it's worth repeating it not only to others but to our own self, that without the Quran, we essentially do not have the choice of the hereafter. Because it is through the Quran we know about the hereafter and we look at our self development, which is a continuous affair which will continue beyond death. If there is no continuation of human life beyond death, then this whole creation becomes meaningless. All human deeds go to waste. And the evidence of this aspect is that if we listen to the conversations and discussions among those people who do not believe in the Quran, or even not aware of the Quran, or not interested in the Quran, they will always come to this conclusion that we are not sure what is the purpose of human creation and human life in this world. Then the Quran states that all the treasures of Allah are made available according to prescribed laws. These resources are meant for the whole of mankind and must not be retained in just a few hands. And understanding this part is part of understanding Deen and part of the process of establishing Deen, because it is one of the causes for which we establish the system of Deen. Now let us look at the first verse of today's presentation, 1796. Be part of the experience of the Book of Allah and its guidance. Kul kafa billahi shahidam baini wa bainakum innahu kana bi ibadihi khabiram basira. Say to them that I have explained in sufficient detail about Wahi and Risalat, and Risalat means communicating of Allah's Wahi to fellow human beings. If despite this you do not accept Iman in my Wahi, then I do not have any way of influencing you. The ultimate verdict between you and me will be under the sight of Allah, because He is aware of the deeds of all men and He keeps them in His sight. Short verse, but there are a number of points which need our attention. Few more reflections on this verse. This aspect is repeated in many verses, that Allah is aware of human deeds and the messenger and his companions are provided with assurance that they are not alone. The law of requital takes into account every effort of theirs, and the results of their efforts will become manifested at some point in the future. This repetition points to an important aspect of the human psyche, i.e. forgetfulness. And we know we do forget. That is why Quran repeats its message in different forms in various verses. The Quran has repeated this fact about the working of the law of requital, that Allah is aware of what human beings do and He watches over the deeds of everyone. There is an important aspect over here for us as students of the Quran, that while we see law of requital working in the world, but relating it to Allah as being students of the Quran is also important. That Allah is present everywhere and is ensuring that His law of requital always brings out all those consequences which are related to all deliberate thoughts as well as our deliberate deeds. Here the messenger is told to announce this fact, that since this message is from Allah, hence He is present as a witness on all actions and transactions of mine. And this aspect is not to scare us or make us fearful as students of the Quran. In fact, this is to give us assurance and also encourage us that we should always remember that Allah's laws are favoring those who follow those laws, and that He is aware of this fact. The language used in the verse is very powerful. Kul, say to them, kafa billahi shahidam baini wa bainakum. Say, enough is Allah for a witness between me and you. It's a great statement of fact which human beings who are on this path declare it to others, because through this they not only tell others, but they also reassure themselves repeatedly that Allah is with them, that is, His laws are going to be supporting their efforts in this life. Then it concludes by stating, Innahu kana bi'ibadihi khabiram basira. Since all human beings are the servants of Allah, i.e., under His laws, whether they like it or not, hence they cannot escape the grip of His sight. He knows and sees everything in the human world. Now, what I've done in this slide is an excerpt from Islam, A Challenge to Religion. I was going through this book for its final publication, and I came across this paragraph. I thought I'll share it with you. The human self has the capacity to develop itself on the model of the divine attributes. It then rises higher and higher in the scale of existence. It is a hard task, and man should be perpetually on his guard against all that threatens from within or without to weaken and emasculate his self. So what it means is that we should be all the time very, very aware of what is going into our mind and what is coming out of our mind and how it is affecting ourself, our outlook, our conduct, our behavior, our conversation. Only the strong self can forge ahead towards the goal of self-realization. A weak self can easily deviate from the right path. The restrictions which the Quran imposes on the individual are not designed to curb his freedom, but to strengthen him and to stiffen his resistance to destructive forces so that he may form a strong character and build up an enduring personality. Men of weak character often make good resolutions but seldom carry them out. Very important, we can see people making big claims because the words come cheap. It's all hot air if we do not follow it with actions. A man may resolve to get up early in the morning, but when the time comes, he lacks the will to leave his comfortable bed. Another man may be determined to keep an appointment, but at the same moment, his resolve weakens and he fails to turn up. And we see these examples all around us. In both cases, the man failed because of a fatal weakness in their character. I will repeat this sentence. It's very important because the words used by Allama Pervez is fatal weakness. Because if our self is destroyed, then essentially what we have done in this life, for this self, there is nothing in the hereafter. The discipline of the Quranic way of life is intended to strengthen the self so that it may successfully resist all forces which threaten its integrity and remain steadfast in the pursuit of the good. Now let us go to the next verse, 1797. Come to grips with the law of guidance of Allah. وَمَنْ يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَهُوَ الْمُهْتَدِي وَمَنْ يُضْلِلْ فَلَنْ تَجِدَ لَهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِنْ دُونِهِ وَنَحْشُرُهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَلَى وُجُوهِهِمْ عُمْيًا وَبُكْمًا وَصُمًّا مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمَ كُلَّمَا خَبَتْ زِدْنَاهُمْ سَعِيرًا. But keep this reality in mind that only that person is on the right path who treads according to the guidance provided by Allah. The person who abandons this path, no one in the world can be his helper. If there can be any helper, then it can only be Allah, whose guidance he had abandoned. And we will raise them up upside down on the day of reckoning, humiliated and ruined in this world and also in the life of the hereafter, blind, dumb, and deaf, devoid of intellect and reasoning. Their final abode will be that of hell. Whenever its fire will be about to be extinguished, we will rekindle it, i.e., there will be no lessening in their punishment. Further reflections and cross-referencing on this verse. If we look at the translation of the first part of the verse, for example, it is he whom Allah guides, that is on true guidance, but he whom he leaves astray, for such will you find no protector beside him. It appears as if man has no choice and it is up to Allah to guide man to leave him astray. This is not correct, as the subsequent part of verse makes clear what is the consequence of not being on the guidance of the Quran. And this is the problem with the prevalent translations, that people, if they look at one part of the verse, then it gives a different impression and it doesn't provide any link or cause and effect to what is subsequently stated in the same verse. So it is important that we should look at verses in the context of the law of requital and the way we make choices in life, and then we live by the consequences of whatever choices we have made in this world. In another verse, Quran says, وَقُلِّ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Say, the truth from your Rabb has arrived. Let him who will accept Iman and let him who will reject it. So we can't go wrong with these with these verses of the Quran, which are even translated wrongly, if we look at other parts of the Quran where things are stated in a different way. So the basic fact is that the choice is our, whether we want to have Iman or we want to follow the path of Kufr. The whole system of the universe is created to hold man responsible for his deeds. And we know this verse, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Allah created the heavens and the earth for al-haq, that is to produce constructive results. So if there are not constructive results in our world, that means we are not following haq. The system is wrong, the system is batil. And in order that each self may find the recompense of what it has earned, and none of them be wronged. So no injustice is done to anyone. And we have gone through these aspects previously as well, but it is good to remind ourselves. Part of becoming muttaqi is to be fully aware of one's deeds. And Quran states, وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. And the verse starts addressing Momineen that they should become muttaqi. And let every self know what it has sent forward for its tomorrow. So Quran tells us that every day we should see that what we are doing, what impact it will have on my future and on the life of the hereafter, and how it will affect my self-development. Continuing further on this verse, in the domain of khalq, we can figure out the cause for every issue, and the Quran has pointed to this in relation to Jannat, that Lahum fiha ma yasha'una khalidina fiha kana ala rabbika wadan mas'ula. We know about two domains of Amr and Khalq. Amr is the one where Allah decides according to His Mashiach what laws are to be implemented in the domain of creation. And within the domain of creation, we can understand because we live within the domain of creation, because we are creation ourselves. In the domain of Amr, we do not know what made Allah to decide on certain law. So that aspect we should keep in mind. For them, there will be therein all that they wish for. They will dwell there for aye. A promise for which your Rabb can be questioned. Very important point here, that in the domain of khalq, in the domain of creation, we should question everything around us so that we can find an answer, because answers can only be discovered if we make an effort and question. That is why questioning our creation, questioning our own purpose of life will lead us to seeking guidance from the Quran. The important point is to question in order to reach the correct conclusion. And the societies in which people do not question, particularly the religious ones, you will see that those societies will always be backward, because there is no research and development taking place over there. Whole research and development aspect in the developed world is based on finding an answer to some question. In the next part of the verse, it is clarified that without the guidance of the Quran, life is lived as a blind, dumb, and deaf. The reason is clear, that all those benefits which are associated with the obedience of Allah's laws simply cannot be accessed and acquired. Let us look at some examples of such people as noted in the Quran. I have taken some of these aspects from our last publication, the Book of Destiny. It is worth going through it for more details. First is, Innaka la tusmi'ul mauta wa la tusmi'ul summa ad-du'a iza wallahu mudbirin. Truly you cannot make the dead to listen, nor can you cause the deaf to hear the call, that is dua, when they turn their back in retreat. Very interesting. If people haven't come to the Quran, or they have rejected the message of the Quran, then Quran calls them they are living dead. And in fact, if we put life of the hereafter in front of us, and if we look at it from the developed self point of view, we will find what the Quran is saying. So wherever we are giving message to others, we should remind them that if they want to have life according to the Quran, then they should respond to the message of the Quran and its guidance. Then it added, وَمَا أَنْتَ بِهَادِي الْأُمْيِ عَنْ ضَلَالَتِهِمْ إِنْ تُسْمِعُ إِلَّا مَنْ يُؤْمِنُ بِآيَاتِنَا. Nor can you be a guide to the blind, that is to prevent them from straying. Only those will you make to listen who have iman in our signs. Very important aspect. We have to live our life by looking at all the signs around us. And if all these signs which are around us and within us, that is our thinking abilities, our cognitive abilities, if these also do not force us to think about our own creation, our own existence, our own purpose of life, then essentially, according to the Quran, we are blind, deaf, and dumb. More about those who go astray. Then there are those who make their desires as their God, that is Allah, and as a result prevent others from coming in this direction. And Quran says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَصَدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ قَدْ ضَلُّوا ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. And we see these things in and around us, that where people act as hurdles for others, while they are preventing themselves from coming to the guidance, they also discourage others and try to distract them as well. Those who resort to kufr and keep off others from the path of Allah have verily strayed far away from the path. Then there are people who themselves are misguided and also misguide others. وَإِن كَثِيرًا لَيُضِلُّونَ بِأَهْوَائِهِمْ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. But many do mislead by their unchecked desires without knowledge. Resorting to shirk leads to gross injustice. And Quran says, Inna Allaha la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi. Surely there is no protection from Allah when the path of shirk is adopted, because a contaminated mind cannot implement the system of deen, because it simply cannot acquire that self which is capable enough to understand the system of deen and then come together with those who are trying to establish the system of deen. Hypocrisy leads to loss of direction in life and ultimately it becomes exposed. Innal munafiqina yukhadi'una Allah wa hum khadi'uhum. The hypocrites think they are deceiving Allah, but He will overreach them. They simply cannot, because anyone who is a liar and is an hypocrite or is doing kufr, they are actually harming themselves. They are not harming Allah or His cause. And they cannot harm Jamaat Momineen as well, because they are fully aware of them. Those who commit injustices, that is zulm, the path of guidance can never become available to them. This is another very important sign for us as students of the Quran, to see that people who do not come to the Quran, if we try to find out their background and what they are doing, we will see that they are doing some injustices. And because of those injustices, their psyche is not inclined towards the Quran. This is the way system functions. It is not that we are trying to put them down. It is the way we should try to understand that if people are doing wrong and they accept wrong and they like doing wrong, then if we try to give them message, they are not going to be attracted by the Quran. This is the way human psyche functions. They have to give up those injustices. They should first come to this conclusion what they are doing is wrong. Wallahu la yahdil qawm az-zalimin. Allah does not guide people committed to doing injustices to the correct destination. Next verse 1798, do not remove the choice of achieving a life beyond death. ذَلِكَ جَزَاؤُهُمْ بِأَنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا وَقَالُوا أَإِذَا كُنَّا عِظَامًا وَرُفَاتًا أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُوثُونَ خَلْقًا جَدِيدًا. This is because, having rejected the truth of our laws, having selected the wrong path for themselves, whose outcome was nothing else but destruction and ruin, it was their view that if we make such an arrangement that we can escape the accountability of society, then there can be none to hold us accountable. This was the reason that they used to say that when after death we will become a skeleton of bones and our body will become decomposed into dust, will we be resurrected anew once more? It's a great self-deception in which human beings suffer. And we can see that going on at least at the scale of nations which are powerful and what they are doing in the world. And they think that they can get away with the wrongs they are committing. A few more comments on this verse. Continuing from the previous verse here, the Quran has declared its verdict on those who deliberately choose to follow the path of kufr, that they will face the destructive consequences of their path. They simply cannot escape these, as the law of requital operates on 24/7 basis and nothing escapes its grip. The interesting part of the verse is the emphasis on kafaru bi ayatina, displaying kufr towards the signs of Allah. This theme of pointing to the signs of Allah runs through many verses of the Quran. We are provided with metacognitive and intellectual reasoning traits for a purpose, so that we can observe, reflect, and then come to some conclusion based on the evidence presented. If we fail to do so, then we essentially behave like animals. Even if we are living in a worst of circumstances, for example, under poverty, deprivation, maybe slavery, we should still question it and see that why it is the way it is, and can it get better? Who is doing it? And that is important for our own self-development, because the moment we start questioning, then we will find out some solution at some point as and when an opportunity arises. In the view of the Quran, if we do not use our cognitive faculties as directed, that is by making choices, then we fail to meet the requirement of the purpose of our creation as human beings. This is the reason it invites Momineen, and that is by coming together to create a system which helps fellow mortals to take notice of this aspect of theirs. Some signs of interest over here. What I've done is that I thought that to add some photos over here to draw our attention. And these are common sights in our life. For example, Allah has created sun, which gives or which provides us free light and time, and of course heat and energy. And see to what extent Allah has gone to plan a universe, a world which is suitable for human life. And here is the moon to provide light and tides and time, and of course provides beauty as well. And then there is created scenery, for example, to satisfy our aesthetic side. Of course, all of these things are useful, like water and firewood and greenery, and of course the clouds at the top. But the main issue is that Allah has gone to that extent that we got those attributes of appreciating beauty around us. And see how many of us people go around to look at this scenery and enjoy it. But our mind should go to that side as well, that it is created for a purpose. And the purpose is to recognize the importance of our creation and to seek guidance and then develop ourselves. Merely looking at the scenery and not appreciating who has created it, that means we have missed the point. And then is desert, created desert, for example, beauty, calmness, and sand. And that is another important aspect, that there is no monotony in Allah's word. There is a variation everywhere. That is why those who draw borders and prevent human beings going from one border, from one place to another place, they are actually rebelling against Allah. And then He has created seasons, and we all know about it, that it is due to the rotation of the earth around the sun. And of course, that is the way the whole thing goes through a process of 4 seasons. And then He created all these human beings, men and women, and all of them possess a self and an ability to develop that self. And we should avoid acting like a crowd, unguided crowd, but look at our creation and then, as students of the Quran, go beyond it. And of course, this is a picture, I put it here, that if our aim of life is that life will end with death, then of course we will not go beyond the physical pleasures of our life. There is nothing wrong with it. This is technology. It should be utilized for the good of everyone, not to be concentrated in few hands. And then the same human beings over here have created this as well. And we should be able to compare the two, that what choices we have made because of which we have created this disharmony and imbalance in the world. And this is the crux of understanding the system of deen, that all these signs should point to this fact that there is a higher purpose awaiting us, and we should work for the system of deen so that there is an equitable distribution of wealth, resources, and there are opportunities for people to understand the importance of self-development. Physical death is an important sign. The next part of the verse points to the aspect of our physical death, which is also a sign which needs to be recognized and then come to some conclusion about our finite stay in this world. Merely accepting our death as a fait accompli is a failure of our intellect to find a rational basis for this death. If death is considered to be an end to a rationally thinking being, then its creation and life are meaningless. Because if there is no purpose when we are about to die and we do not know the purpose of our existence, and if we look at our past and see not much we have done except just going through the material benefits of life, then essentially we have wasted our time in this life. So that is why this sentence is quite important. If death is considered to be an end to a rationally thinking being, then its creation and life are meaningless. And Quran says we have created this universe as al-haq, not batil. All these laws in the outer world and the permanent values guiding the self-development process have no significance. Animals do not care about any laws as they are not cognizant of these. Since human beings possess this ability, hence they need to explore this aspect further. Next point, instead of pursuing their thinking in this direction, most have found answers through religious beliefs, which, having created a false concept of God, left it to this God to sort out their affairs for them. And for example, they have invented this belief of taqdeer. This is a sheer state of a cop-out and leads to not taking responsibility for their decisions and actions in this life. I know we have gone through this aspect many times before as well, but I thought to put it down here in case somebody is watching this particular presentation first time. Further reflections. The next part of the verse counters this line of thinking and states, وَقَالُوا أَإِذَا كُنَّا إِظَامًا وَرُفَاتًا أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُوثُونَ خَلْقًا جَدِيدًا, i.e. they state and think that when we are reduced to bones and dust, should we really be raised up to a new creation? Despite having the desire to live forever, when the Quran tries to explain the existence of the life of the hereafter, instead of reflecting on its possibility, these human beings do not wish to even pause and reflect. We all want to live forever, and here comes an opportunity for us to follow a certain path under this guidance and not only get a life of the hereafter, but may be able to establish the system of deen within our lifespan over here. And even if that system is not established within our lifespan, at least we will know what truth is, what al-haq is, and what batil is. And knowing the truth in itself makes us free. Why do they resort to such kufr? Because they do not wish to think about the accountability which is associated with following this path. This hampers the path of their base desires. They want the immediate benefits of the path of their desires, never mind the long-term effects, which will even deprive them of the life of the hereafter. It looks like acquisition, but it is not really acquisition. It is a statement of fact by the Quran. When Quran states these things, we should look at it that what facts are hidden in it. What exactly Quran is trying to tell us in terms of our existence and its relation to the life of the hereafter. Here, by addressing ourselves, the Quran tells us about an interesting fact of our life as human beings. The life of the hereafter will be a new creation, unlike this biological creation which consists of the death-prone body which we possess here. What a great good news or glad tidings the Quran is giving us over here. That over here this body suffers so many ailments and diseases and problems, particularly in a world which is based on human, should I say, concoctions and inventions and human evil, where, for example, like COVID-19, all these biological warfare kind of things are spread around and causing problems for fellow human beings to draw some immediate advantage for the rich and powerful. If we do not have this biological existence, which is going to meet another death, then how big blessing will it be? And one should work for that, and this should also be part of our motivation. Next verse 1799, life at another level is a fact. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ قَادِرٌ عَلَىٰ أَنْ يَخْلُقَ مِثْلَهُمْ وَجَعَلَهُمْ أَجَلًا لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ فَأَبَى الظَّالِمُونَ إِلَّا كُفُورًا. Do those who say such things not reflect that the Allah who has created this whole system of the universe, whereas there was nothing previously, is he not capable of creating another life of these people like this? For this purpose, he has appointed a duration for the existing physical life, after which for the emergence of new life, there is no kind of doubt or suspicion in this. It is an established reality, but what can be the solution when those people who have elected to rebel against our laws know nothing other than rejection? Some more reflections on this verse. Continuing from the previous verse, here our attention is drawn to the creation and presence of the system of the universe around us. Since it is a physical universe visible to our eyes, which are signs in themselves, hence we cannot be deluded, it exists as an undeniable fact. Next, a question is thrown at us, has he not got power to create the like of us once again? In a very logical way, to draw our attention to the fact that he who can create the first time will always have the potential and ability to create again and again. It also means that the intellectual ability provided to us can figure out the details from the Quran only if it chooses to pay attention to its verses. An important aspect is noted next, وَجَعَلَهُمْ أَجَلًا. There is a term defined for this. This is in reference to following the law. This could be in reference to the period between our death and resurrection in the life of the hereafter, i.e. the time required for becoming a new creation with the same self with which it left the world. And I put a question mark over here because we can think through this verse in the wider context as well. Continuing, then the verse confirms it by stating firmly, La raiba fihe. There is no case for doubt and suspicion in this fact. As stated at the beginning of the Quran, Zalikal Kitabu la raiba fihe hudallil muttaqeen. This is the book in which there is no doubt and is a guide for those who wish to be muttaqeen. If we relate these two aspects here, then it will mean that by becoming muttaqi, these matters related to the hereafter and a new creation will become clear. A lot of these things which are noted in the Quran, we may not understand initially, but once we start following this path and as the changes and transformation takes place within our own self, and as our self-awareness increases, the horizon of our consciousness increases, many of these verses will start making sense and will clarify their own meanings to us. Because a lot of these are related to human psyche and the transformation which takes place within us once we start following the Quran and its values. The Quran does not wish us to accept things without logic and evidence. Hence, in the next part of the verse, it tells us the obstructions which the human psyche creates in coming to terms with its own existence and the purpose of life. And by stating fa'aba, disliking something, remaining away, rejecting intensely. And this word is also used in connection with Iblis as well. And I've quoted the verse here, 234. This is a state of repugnance, arrogance, and false pride which prevents us from accepting the truth and facts. And we observe it in the world around us. A lot of people behave like that. What happens when human beings behave like this? They become unjust and tyrannical and thus display every form of kufr. A few more comments on this verse. We can see in this verse how the Quran has brought together a number of facts of our existence, the display of which we can see in the world of 2024 by those who are in power. Since they do not think about their continuous accountability, hence they keep advancing in their tyranny and injustice and create bloodshed and chaos in the world. We can also witness that despite being a non-Quranic system, there are numerous warners who ask them to stop doing this. This underlying fear created by mortality and death heavily impacts the human psyche as it creates uncertainty, fear, a sense of vulnerability, and doubt in human minds. This prevents those potentials from turning into abilities which are meant to manifest if the path of Wahi is adopted. The verse sums up by stating, Az-zalimuna illa kufura. This unjust and tyrannical faction carry this out due to their state of kufr. This provides guidance to the students of Deen not to give up, but to keep striving on this path, as Batil is meant to be replaced by Al-Haq. Al-Haq takes time to overcome Batil. And for Al-Haq, initially it looks as if nothing is taking place. But as students of the Quran, we know the first stage is of coming together. Once we have come together and its effects show their influence or show their impact on our self-development, then we will see that gradually it gains strength. Last verse of today's presentation, 1700. Guidance provided on Rububiyat. Kullau antum tamlikuna khazaina rahmati rabbi izalla amsaktum khashyatal infaqe wa kana al-insanu qatura. The consequence of denying the life of the future and thinking that the life of this world as the ultimate aim of life is that these people hoard possessions and wealth for themselves only. They do not keep these openly available for universal Rububiyat. When this is pointed out to them, they reply that this will barely fulfill our needs. If we give it to others and it runs out, then where will we go in the time of our need? A standard answer provided by those who are in position of power. Say to them that this is not the way it is. It is just a matter of mentality. Your condition has become such that if you had control of limitless treasures of the bounties of your Rabb, you would have secured these and held these back lest they become used up. This is because man, the one who views physical life as an end in itself, is very short-sighted and tight-fisted. It is the concept of the immortality of life which creates vastness in human outlook and creates generosity in the heart. Expanding this verse further, in this verse, the Quran has pointed to another important limitation of the human psyche, where due to fear and insecurity, those in a position of power wish to accumulate the earth's resources for themselves. And we can see this happening, particularly those countries which are in position of power. Why do human beings resort to this gross injustice, and why do others allow them to do it? This tendency emanates from two basic instincts of self-preservation and self-aggression, where the fear of becoming poor creates insecurity and one wishes to control the resources of sustenance and so tries to control and exploit fellow mortals, especially those who are weak, made so by man-made systems. That is, first they make them weak, they impose their own rulers on them who follow their wishes, and then these weak human beings living in those parts of the land, they exploit them. Then those in power exert control on others using force. And wherever these human beings do not listen to them, then they go and invade them and kill them. And we can see this going on in today's world. This verse sheds light on this aspect as noted in this verse, Ash-shaytanu ya'idukumul faqra wa yamurukum bil fashai. Shaitan threatens you with poverty and bids you conduct unseemly. And this is a guidance from the Quran that don't do it. And this is addressed to Momineen. This is why the system of Salat helps to forbid from Inna Salata Tanha Anil Fashai wal Munkar. The second part is, as a Salat restrains from acting unseemly. The same terms is used fasha over here, fasha. Fasha means niggardly, holding back the resources of the earth and accumulating for your own self and forbidding others from utilizing those resources and depriving others. Mentioning this aspect after pointing to the importance of the life of the hereafter, our attention is drawn to the importance of Iman in the hereafter. This needs our repeated attention so that we are convinced of its existence by taking steps to become Momineen and Muttaqeen. We can see that how Quran guides us in terms of changing our psyche, in terms of changing our outlook. If we can diagnose the problem, if we can diagnose the disease, then the treatment becomes easier. And the Quran not only helps us to diagnose the disease, it also gives us the treatment and the prescription. It says, follow this prescription of mine, that is Allah's prescription noted in the Quran, and then see how things start changing in the outer world. Continuing with this verse, another aspect which we witness in the world is the multiplying of the means of sustenance through human efforts and by doing continuous research with a view to maximizing availability across the world. For example, through technology and improved techniques of agriculture, the yields of crops have increased in the last century or so. We can easily see that if there is an equitable distribution of food in the world, no one will go to sleep hungry. Presently, due to the relative values of man-made systems, every nation is only taking into account the needs of its own citizens, and at the same time, the powerful nations are also exploiting other weaker nations who are kept poor through a well-established capitalist system. The Quran helps us to identify these imbalances and then presents the solution which appeals to any rational mind. The Quran has drawn our attention to various aspects of natural resources, for example, hydrological cycle, regrowth of vegetation, reuse of agricultural land, distribution of sources of energy throughout the planet. And this is very interesting that all these sources of energy, for example, fossil fuels, are not given to one country but in different lands so that we interact with each other. Not confined to just a few countries, distribution of minerals, variation in landscape in various parts of the world, so that human beings go from one to another and appreciate the beauty created in the world. These are meant to be used by the whole of mankind in order to promote balance and harmony among them. It is not just a question of going from one land to another and spending some holidays, but we need to also appreciate the love and affection which one feels as a human being towards other human beings. A quote from the Book of Destiny. In another verse, 1521, Quran says, وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا عِندَنَا خَزَائِنُهُ وَمَا نُنَزِّلُهُ إِلَّا بِقَدَرٍ مَعْلُومٍ. We have gone through this verse previously as well under Surah Al-Hijr. There are far more details covered over there. We can have a look on that presentation. There is not a thing, but its treasures are with us, but we only send down thereof in due and ascertainable measures. Let us share here an excerpt from the Book of Destiny on the meaning of this verse. The words known qadr are worthy of close attention, biqadrin maloom, i.e. those estimations and scales about which knowledge has been made available, which man can discover through his own research and endeavors. So when Quran says that there is enough for everyone for all times, we have to look at it that why is Quran saying that, and then look at all the factors which contribute to all these resources in the world. At another place it is stated that we have made this arrangement according to our law of Mashiach, and the word used in this verse is ma yashau. And the rationale for this is that if this had not been done and rizq was continuously taken out from the earth without any balance and proportion, then those people who commandeer the sources of rizq would have created chaos in the world. And this is very interesting, and we see the evidence of it that these resources are distributed throughout the world, and it is a huge sign for the students of the Quran that everything is carefully planned so that human beings who have acquired all the resources, for example, in one land, they will hold on to that. And since these are distributed even under man-made system, at least human beings in different lands can get access to some of them. But this is not an ideal or a satisfactory solution to the problem. From known qadr, this indication becomes apparent that the potential of the land to produce rizq is beyond measure. But the acquisition of rizq will be according to the knowledge, ability, and effort of man, and this is where the knowledge of Wahi comes in. Verse 100, reassurance to Momineen in relation to the system of Deen. What I've done is I've taken this slide out of our previous presentation on this verse 1521, and I thought to share it again. Human beings also make these resources sustainable where possible, and where these appear to be finite, for example, fossil fuels, for which we make efforts to search for other sources of energy. This is part of discovering other means of sustenance, the ability for which is within us. We need to keep in mind as students of the Quran that whatever is discovered by man is meant to be brought out. All this becomes a step towards the evidence that the Quran is al-Haq And Quran has stated, Sanurihim ayatina fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim hatta yatabayyana lahum annahul haqqu. We have already discovered this, what is stated in this verse, that soon the signs of Allah will appear in the outer world as well as within the human psyche until it proves itself, that is, the Quran proves itself to us that it is definitely haqq. But we already know it as students of the Quran. So in that way, we can say that it has already been confirmed to us because we made an effort to know about it. This does not mean that we as a system wait for others to discover these new resources and modes of utilization of these resources for the use of just a few privileged groups. Rather, it is our duty to reflect on this aspect and engage in research and development with the view of meeting the needs of every human being in today's world. And of course, by meeting these needs, we have to have a pleasure as well. Just imagine how much pleasure it gives to a student of the Quran that the needs of every human being are met in the world, and that affection, that love which comes out of this feeling. And that is where that phrase of the Quran comes before us, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And to have enough ready to welcome those who are going to arrive here in the future. Drawing the attention of others to this is part of this responsibility of ours. And of course, if we do not understand ourselves, how can we explain it to others? So all these efforts on this platform of ours is with this view that we come to grips with this, develop ourselves, and then explain to others. Regarding the optimum and appropriate use of finite resources, for example, fossil fuels and their impact on our world's environment, this is part of this understanding. If we look at the present world, there is meaningless movement of vehicles and aeroplanes taking place in the aimless pursuit of base desires. And that is important, that everything which is done as human beings, we should keep in mind that does it meet the higher purpose of life? And does it solve any human problem? What will I get out of it? But at the present, this is not the case. The whole thing is pursuit of material benefits and base desires. But that is fine. We have to understand that as well in order to understand the message of the Quran. Those desires in which the hereafter and the interest of the whole mankind never form a part of it. By adding maloom, that is something which is known at the end, Allah has invited us to gain knowledge from every aspect in the world in which we live, and to then analyze it critically using the Quranic lens and light. Thank you for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. Thank you. See a sheep